Ladies and gentlemen, it is Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran, and today we are going to be checking out one of the most brutal wars of all time. This is surviving 100 days in a Minecraft war. Let's get into it.
I survived 100 days in a Minecraft war, the first of its kind. In this video, 10 factions battle it out. The rules are simple. Every single faction has a beacon. This beacon must be placed inside your base. If an enemy destroys this beacon, you are out of the game. It's the last beacon standing. 10 factions, 100 days. Who's gonna win? If you guys go on to enjoy this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you're new.
Okay, so first off, we got to talk multi-faction warfare like this, or multi sort of country warfare, is really uncommon. And the reason is because any individual is outnumbered 10 to 1 or 9 to 1. That means that what you end up having to have happen in order to survive is that there's a massive incentive to join the largest alliance. If you could create a 6-person alliance, a 6-faction alliance that represents 60% of the combat power, they can one by one eliminate the other people who aren't part of another alliance. And then what happens is that alliance, that 6-person, alliance, turns on each other and finishes the job. Sometimes they break into 3 and 3. How does this, in the real world, we look at, for example, the Second World War, where exactly this happened. You had two major you had a whole bunch of global powers, right? The United States, the UK, France, Russia, Germany, Japan. And there was when war became declared, they realized that they couldn't fight 50 versus 50. So quickly, alliances formed, and they basically split the world into two: the Allies and the Axis powers. And so these were roughly sort of matched. The truth is it was sort of a foregone conclusion. The Allies with the United States just had too much industrial power. Britain's colonies also conveyed a massive amount of resources. It was never really that even, but for a while it seemed like it might be. So you had these countries, they battled each other out, again, splitting the world 50-50. And then as soon as the Second World War ended, what started? The Cold War. So those former allies split themselves into two. You had the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc countries, right? The capitalist and command economies. And they engaged in a Cold War with each other. And so what you see is, of course, that these sort of things never really stop. They're always evolving, right? And these allies, there's an incentive to join the biggest team, to create the biggest team, to beat your enemies.
It helps.
Let's see if it plays out here.
Me out a lot, and it lets me know that you guys want more of this type of content. But let the Minecraft war begin.
Dun dun.
Day 1 started with all factions starting at the center of the map. We all dropped from the sky. You can see every faction scurrying, trying to get out of here as quick as possible. Day 1 and Day 2, well, they were grace periods. No fighting could commence yet. Here's the current squad that we got. Tommers, the absolute brains of the operation. Stockmans, the beefy bodyguard. Dev Awake, the trusty pilot. Jack, my right-hand man. And Factions Doc, well, let me just say, he's a killing machine. If you guys know who he is, you know who he is. Perfect member to have in our team.
So the period of peace before war is a time of immense tension. And this is true. Actually, the earliest recordings we have of state warfare is by a guy named Thucydides from ancient Greece. And he talked about the Peloponnesian War, or Athens versus Sparta, two city-states. And what he talks a lot about is the sense that these two factions, these two city-states, knew for decades that they had to fight, that only one city-state could dominate the area they lived in, called the Peloponnese. And only one state could truly rule the Peloponnesian Peninsula. And that meant that as they both grew in power, both sides believed that they were not powerful enough to decisively beat the other one. And what happened is that eventually both sides felt they were powerful enough, they're at the zenith of their power, and that they could defeat the enemy, to defeat the other state. And so, of course, they launched their war, and it was a 30-year war that was a stalemate for decades. But the point is that both sides knew that this war was coming. And so they both consolidated their power, built their militaries, assigned alliances, defeated other powers that might one day betray them or work for their enemy. All of these things to set the conditions so that when war happened, they were prepared to decisively get victory.
We got scouting. We wanted to find the most suitable place to make a Minecraft base. See, here's the thing. To win a Minecraft war, you gotta have the best base on the server. So let's explain our base. The first thing our base needs is plenty of water, and luckily we're in the middle of an ocean, so we have plenty of that. We're then gonna build a big square base. We're then gonna raise that off the surface of the water so that we have a 360 view of the surrounding area. This is going to be our battle platform. We're then gonna build a wall all around the edges. And then one by one we're going to erect a tower on each corner. Higher than the battle platform, but this will give us vital intel on people approaching our base. No one is getting...
So what he is describing by putting this base in the middle of open ocean, he's creating what's called standoff distance. And standoff distance is the military concept that, again, dates back to the era of cannon warfare, where you have to be able to see your enemy approaching long before they can engage. No chance that they are going to sneak up on you. This, of course, allows you to fight them from, well, while having standoff, while having a considerable distance between you two. So it relies, though, on projectile weapons. As you guys probably know in Minecraft, there are some people that can build sort of projectile weapons, and there's, I believe, bow and arrow. So it's interesting to see how they are going to take the weapons that they have and use them tactically and strategically.
Into this base. The only way in and out of this base is our ladder system, which is a very dangerous thing to climb if you're an enemy. This is our water fortress. And in the middle of our fortress, we have a valuable vault. This is where we're going to store all our valuable resources and our most prized possession, our beacon. Remember, if this thing gets destroyed, we are out of the game. This cannot be breached. We must protect this at all costs. And that's our base.
Now, one of the things that's interesting is he believes that he can win via defense. Here's the problem. They have to destroy their enemy beacons. Right now, they have no plan to do that. And that, I think, is going to be their fatal flaw in this plan, is that without a plan to destroy the other beacons, the enemy could focus their entire energy, all of their efforts, on infiltrating their base. And eventually they'll win, right? Because they're on the defensive. And someone on offense, especially in Minecraft, where you don't run out of resources. Sometimes you can just play defensively until your opponent literally runs out of resources, but that's not really the case here. So I'm not seeing a winning strategy, right? What's going to happen when they have to vacate their base to destroy their enemy's beacon?
On day 11, we finally came out of our base cocoon. I was on a simple scouting mission, which was successful. We found plenty of bases.
Okay, this base also has a considerable standoff distance. It's sort of interesting to see the glass roof allowing the enemy to look in at the internal structure of the base. I think that's actually a liability. Another base with a lot of standoff, forcing opponents to climb this mountain to get to the top, giving the defenders the ability to attack them. But here's the problem. This relies on reliable scouting, good intelligence. If you can walk right up to the base and never get spotted by an actual human being, then all your standoff distance didn't help you. This is just some walls. There's not even that much standoff. Unless there's oh, it's underground. Oh, it's an entire underground bunker. See, you notice how all that you found is the entrance to this bunker. You don't even know what's going on underneath. This is what's called good OPSEC, or operational security. And the fact that there's nothing transparent, all you know is that there's 2 entrances leading underground, right? What might be even more fascinating is, what if you didn't have this wall and you camouflaged the entrances so that it became impossible to find, and that most of your defensive traps were actually under the ground? That, to me, would be the more fascinating call.
But on returning to my base to refuel, I spotted an enemy base so close, I don't know how we didn't even notice them. And this was a hazard. These enemies we needed to annihilate. So, I landed the plane back at base, and it was all hands on deck. We decided that we were going to strike first, and part 1 of the plan was going to be bombarding them from the air. See, Tommers here, like I said in the intro, he's the brains of the operation.
Well, if he was the brains, he would know that the best bet is to negotiate with potential enemies, join forces, and eliminate the most threatening enemies that you found, the enemies with the best defensive position. You want to attack those with the most forces. So you want to build an alliance of even just 2 or 3 people, factions, and push your most worrisome opponent.
And this guy, let me just say, he had a genius plan. Tommers, who was mining under the ground for a few days when we were building the base, noticed that a few caves had signs of life in it that wasn't from us. So he knew if he could find those caves and then find those mines, maybe we can find a backdoor into their base, winning the war between his faction without barely spilling blood. But here's the thing. If the enemies know that Tommers is underground looking for their tunnels, they'll block every single way into the base up, and it won't be a success. So we need to keep them on the surface. And how to do that? Well, attack them. It's that simple. Part 1 of the plan began. We knew that since it was early days, not many teams would have AA guns in the sky, allowing us to bombard their base with barely any repercussions. So a squad of 2 of us took off to attack the base. It's better to strike first.
This is insane, by the way, that Minecraft has like what look like P-51s
instead of striking back. So we began our air raid.
So this is FYI, guys. I know this is Minecraft, but bear with me. This is actually a fighter jet or a fighter configuration from the Second World War. Normally, these would have very small bombs, and usually very few of them, because they were meant to be bomber escorts. There would be heavy bombers that would carry the main payload, but then these fighter escorts would have machine guns, and they would be meant to engage enemy fighters that were trying to shoot down the bombers. Oh, there you go. It has just machine guns. Okay.
As you can see, the bombs that we're dropping aren't doing much damage, but they're not meant
Okay, that's kind of accurate.
to do damage to the base. It's just meant to kill them. But also, at the same time, this is a distraction. If they're up repairing their base, they ain't in their minds. Tommers right now is underground looking. We have one simple job: keep them on the surface at all costs. The bombing raid was going perfect until one fatal mistake where a teammate dropped a bomb on me, rendering my plane useless. My propellers are out.
This is actually true. This is how this will go. Planes will glide in even without power.
Was gliding. I thought at this point I'm gonna glide into the water and the enemy team are gonna come and clean me up. But through a miracle, I managed to glide the plane home at the perfect height. I landed it safe. I now knew since we had one plane out of the sky, it was best to bring home the other plane. These things were expensive and not cheap, so I called the other plane home. The plane that I have in my hand currently, that'll be repaired shortly. But it was now time to commence phase 2 of the plan. And that was to head over on foot. We knew we weren't getting into their base. See, look at this. If I pause this, on the left-hand side of the screen here, they have a pillar box. And on the right-hand side, they have another box. And then they have a very, very small bridge. If you step on that bridge, you will get bombarded from right and left and knocked into the water. Once you're in the water, you're a sitting duck. Water bases are incredibly hard to attack. We knew that. And that's why Tommers was underground looking for a weak point, finding their tunnels, hopefully. We started a fake siege on their base. We did attempt to run for
Whoa, they have M4s in Minecraft? Okay, I'm so confused
the
technologically.
door, but we knew straight away it would be a fail. This is explaining the pillar box situation perfectly for us. So we decided just to fake a siege. We knew that this was drawing all their men and all their resources.
Yeah, this is what's called a feint, or an attack that you either know or are reasonably certain will not achieve big, meaningful gains, but will draw enemy forces away from the main effort. And your main effort is the attack or push that you think is going to actually achieve your tactical or strategic objectives. So usually you have a feint, and then you have a main attack that comes from a different direction. And you want to push your feint until the enemy decisively commits their reserves. Their reserves are going to be mobilized. They're going to come and push that feint. That means that that feint needs to be credible. It can't be just a little bit of light harassing fire without a big push, right? You want the enemy to believe that the feint is a real decisive attack.
Resources up to the surface. It was perfect. We stayed for ages, holding down the fort, while Tommers dug peacefully underground. We battled here for a few days, just holding our ground.
Days. Damn, that's wild.
We were there for so long they even launched a plane on us, bombing their own base. Too bad their pilot didn't really know how to fly. He did more damage to the base than to us. We kept fighting, trying to get closer and closer to the base because we needed to make this look believable. But then I think we believed in ourselves. Because without thinking, we jumped onto their main base area. Without a plan.
Yeah, but that's okay if this was indeed a feint. Now, the problem is if the enemy defeats your feint and then repositions their forces before your main attack is launched, then you've lost the entire point of the feint. The enemy's forces aren't committed somewhere else on the battlefield. They're back to being distributed.
Now, time to commence part 3. And that's keeping them on the surface for a long period of time, even when we aren't at the base. And how do you do that, might you ask? Well, see, we had a thing called a big, massive cannon. We went to the shoreline near their base and we set up an area of operations. Shortly after, we set up the cannon and we started firing in. See,
if their goal is to keep them above ground, launching artillery isn't the way to do it. That's because, of course, the way individuals defend against artillery strikes is to get under cover, get into fighting positions or into underground bunkers.
If we cause enough destruction here, they will be repairing for a few days. Shortly after firing the cannon, Tommers came into our chat saying that he had found a tunnel that wasn't ours and he was pretty sure that it led to their base. He blocked it up and he went back to the base. We continued to do as much damage as possible because we knew if we could still get them distracted when we go to attack their base, it would be perfect. But the enemies joined our call, asking for a ceasefire, wanting the constant barrage to stop. We agreed, but we weren't going to be allies with them, even though they wanted that. But we said we'd have a...
Wait. Here's the thing with the ceasefire. Both sides have to get something. Right now, the enemy is on the ropes. They aren't launching any meaningful offense. They're not a threat to you. So why would you agree to a ceasefire when they're at their most desperate? Instead, right, ceasefires only happen when both sides believe that the costs of continuing operations are unsustainably high. Now, sometimes a ceasefire is temporary. It literally gives both sides a chance to remove wounded soldiers and broken material and replace it with new stuff, or to repair. And it can become more permanent and form sort of a initial. It can be a way to stop the fighting when both sides agree that the fight needs to end, but there's not yet all the details of a peace treaty worked out.
Meeting with them in a few days. Ironically enough, they actually wanted to have a meeting with us, because I think they wanted to be our allies. We didn't want any of that. They were too close to be our allies, and we'd caused too much damage now. They'd backstab us the second they got. And also, we already had allies, who I'll show who they are later on. So Jack and I decided to go sneaky peeky like. We knew where the tunnel was, and we wanted to investigate it. And the best thing to do was to go in there and scout it out first. Find out what we're going into. And let's just say bringing a big army in, sneaking in, it's not very sneaky. So we decided to go as a two-man. We were even so prepared that we even had silencers in case things got hairy. So we entered the tunnel that Thomas had found, and we knew the direction that we had to go. There was only one way. After a while of sneaking down the tunnel, we came to a dead end. That only went right. We just had to keep going left, so we took the first left we could. Then we came into some sort of lava cave, when we noticed that we were in the heart of their base, and it was left open. We knew straight away that we were possibly in their beacon room.
This is the other problem that you're seeing. The word ceasefire, getting two people to shake their hands and say ceasefire, there's no guarantee that the other side isn't going to relaunch offensives. This happens in a lot of broken conflicts, sort of stagnant, long-lasting conflicts, where both sides will agree to a ceasefire, there will be a betrayal, and then the next ceasefire, the other side engages in betrayal right away. And so eventually get to a point where neither side trusts that a ceasefire means anything. And once that happens, you literally are stuck in like an infinite warfare loop. The only way to break it is to have a third party come in, either separate the forces or force the two fighting factions to unite and repel a more dangerous common enemy.
Just from the setup that they had. See, we were in the kill box area. The only thing is the enemies were meant to be in here, and we were meant to be out there, outside that door. We knew that beacon had to be somewhere around here. If we can destroy it, we have successfully knocked out our first team. And knocking out a team that's right next to us like this would be huge. We searched for ages. It looked like they had a maze. But eventually, we found it, knocking them out of the game. But this is the interesting part. The enemies up above who are still repairing their base don't even know that they've been knocked out. It's game over for them. Their base is essentially our base. We snuck home, extracting out of there with their beacon.
This is so great. This is perfectly decisive battle at its finest. You use your deception, you use tactics, you use strategy, and this is a classic example of, you saw what really proved decisive. It wasn't the aircraft, it wasn't the artillery rounds, it was actually diplomatic deception. And just like we talked about, this faction believed they had a ceasefire. That's why their defensive posture was low. But the other faction actually, his faction, betrayed and didn't respect the ceasefire. Now, what this means going forward is that if they ask for ceasefires or alliances or other diplomatic negotiations, that their word will count for very little. The other side will demand some sort of leverage in order to ensure that both sides respect this the agreed upon treaty. So while in the short term this is a victory, in the long term it may prove a problem, because now other factions are way less likely to agree to an alliance, will view this his faction as untrustworthy. So guys, if you enjoyed this, of course hit subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you want me to keep going with this Minecraft war, and if you want access to some breakdowns that are just a little too spicy for YouTube, become a member of the Patreon. Link is in the description. I'll see you in the next one.